We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's May 9th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning.
Good morning, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, and both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. We're going to start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. The first news story could delight BTS fans. Korea Post will issue 1.5 million postage stamps showing BTS album covers next month. This is to celebrate the K-pop band's 10-year anniversary. There will be 10 different designs, each set of stamps sold at around $6. It's the first time a still living and active K-pop boy band has a commemorative stamp made off of them. Usually, living figures cannot make it onto Korea Post commemorative stamps unless they're a president or an important figure who has contributed to elevating the country's national prestige. Moving on to the second one, real estate and property search website Jikbang conducted a survey on some 700 people last month. It found that at least half of those in their 20s and 30s wanted to invest in real estate, but only 2 out of 10 had actually had their own property. Now, this age group showed the most interest in expanding their assets through real estate. Moving on to the third story, getting married and having kids no longer is the norm for many young people. But it seems like this isn't the case for couples who are part of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, formerly known as the Unification Church. On Sunday, around 8,000 couples from 150 countries got married, and the president of this religious organization officiated this large-scale joint wedding. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the third news item. So it's the first time in 3 years this religious federation has held a large-scale joint wedding like this. And due to the pandemic, they restricted the number of couples and people who could attend the ceremony. But this time around, 30,000 people attended the ceremony. And when I first heard about this news story, 2 words caught my attention: 8,000 and joint. I mean, 8,000 couples is a lot of people who want to get married, but to see a joint ceremony, it's very surprising, don't you think, Walter?
Absolutely incredible. I mean, as we saw from the video, there were so many people there. It was almost like a concert was taking place, right? Imagine the catering that had to go along with that, even if they did eat at all. I mean, I was overwhelmed to have like around 200 guests at my wedding. I can't imagine what 8,000 couples, meaning 16,000, I guess, people, plus the 30,000 that you mentioned. That's just incredible to see.
Almost 50,000 people to celebrate couples' weddings.
Right.
It's amazing. And I was actually quite shocked to see so many couples were willing to get married.
Exactly.
What about you, though, Chi?
I had a similar reaction to Walter. It's incredible, but it's intimidating as
For
well.
sure.
And it could be suffocating to have that many couples in one space together. And at the same time, I would think weddings are supposed to be quite special and unique.
And personal.
Yes, and personal for your own couple, right?
sure.
Getting that spotlight to yourselves, but having 8,000 couples get married together, it all seems like you're getting married for the sake of it. You know, the whole wedding is a formal ceremony.
For sure, I agree. But you know, joint weddings are quite common here at the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. And by the looks of the name, you can't tell whether this organization is a religion or not. But it was founded in 1954 by the Korean religious leader Moon Sun-myung. And we're going to move on to our discussion topic. So yesterday was Parents' Day here in Korea. So today on News Gen, we've selected a closely related topic. Take a look at the screen. Should children be responsible for their parents once they get older? Well, the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs has found that perceptions have changed over the past 15 years. In a survey of roughly 8,000 households in Korea, only 21% said they think they should take care of their parents when they're old. Back in 2007, more than half of respondents thought it was a must. Experts analyze that more and more people think it's up to the country to provide appropriate welfare and infrastructure for seniors, rather than their family members. Today, News Gen looks at 3 questions. 1. What do Millennials and Gen Z think about this issue? Should we as children be responsible for our parents once they become seniors? 2. What do young people think about the government's efforts to provide better senior welfare policies? 3. What do Millennial and Gen Z parents expect from their children when they get older then? Taking care of your old parents, is it a must? Well, we're going to hear what these two millennials in the studio think. But before we do that, yesterday was Parents' Day. So I'm wondering, did you guys give your parents carnations or any gifts to express your gratitude on Parents' Day?
Oh, yes, we did. I mean, every year on Parents' Day, we have a family time together. But since it was a Monday this year, we spent some time together on Sunday. We had a family lunch, and I paid for the lunch. And
Wow,
my
that's very
brother,
nice.
I have a brother and a sister. My sister got the carnations and the cake, and my brother got some gifts for our parents. So we had a little family time together. And I also sent some carnations to my uncle as well.
Really?
Yes, because I'm really close to my uncle, and I consider him as my third parent.
What a nice
So-
daughter and niece.
Yeah, so I sent him some carnations to Busan, where he's living right now, yesterday.
All right, what about you, Walter?
God, now I'm going to sound really terrible. Because I didn't, like, my mum lives in Australia, so I didn't get her anything, and I also didn't contact her. So thank you, Jihi, for making me look horrible as a son.
But to your defense, it was only Parents' Day in Korea.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was only Parents' Day in Korea.
There's a Mother's Day too, right?
There is a Mother's Day coming up in Australia, which is this Sunday, so I will make sure to contact her then. But for my parents-in-law, yes, we contacted them. We put a little carnation flower on the top of our daughter's head as they live a little further away. But yes, I am a better son on Sunday this week.
We'll see. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah.
So that's why we chose our main discussion topic today, and we're going to go ahead and right into the question. So should we as children be responsible for our parents once they get older, whether that be, providing any monthly allowances or living together with them? And what's the general opinion of youngsters in Korea?
Well, it's quite interesting how the perception of having to take care of your parents once they get old has changed over time. So if we take a look at the screen together, we see a pie chart, and we see that only 1 out of 5 Koreans, or about 21%, think it's the responsibility of children to take care of their parents when they get old. However, this whole idea of a filial piety or paying respect to the elderly or your parents was a lot higher 15 years ago, because back then more than half the population, with 53%, believed that you should be supporting your older parents. And the duty of having to support your parents still exists in our society, but it seems clear that this traditional Confucian idea that the children and family provide welfare for elderly parents is no longer really strong in Korean society.
I totally agree. I do think that strong Confucian traditions have changed. They've evolved for sure, but we're now seeing longer life expectancies
Exactly.
among the population. And does that in any way affect people's burden on having the responsibility to take care of their elderly parents?
Totally, because a recent survey, it was a study, in fact, a medical study conducted in the UK, the life expectancy of Korean women and men born in Korea in the year 2030 would be 90.82 and 84.07 respectively, and this would be the ranking number 1 in the world. So this extended longevity leads to the increased burden for children to take care of their parents. However, at the same time, this recent other study conducted by Statistics Korea found out that the perception that parents should take care of themselves because they're getting healthier.
Right.
Longevity growing means they're getting healthier, and that the government should provide support for these older parents is a more common perception nowadays.
I see. And Walter, do you agree to the general public's opinion about this?
Yeah, well, even for the people who I guess want their children to look after them, some parents are even going as far as to sue their children for not taking on the responsibility to, look after them. I mean, it's very hard for our generation to understand. We are very, I guess, in a way, a little bit self-centered. We want to care about our lives, and once we get older, we want to take care of ourselves. But for their generation, I mean, that was how they grew up. They had to take care of their parents and their grandparents and so forth and so on. But obviously with inflation, the price of living is going up. It's very hard to even look after oneself. So how can we look after, let's say, an elderly person with their health issues or whatever? I mean, our birth rate is also going down. So then if you take into account that if you're going to have a baby and look after an elderly person, then obviously that triples your, expenses, should I say. But on the other end of the scale, as Jihi mentioned, there are many parents who don't want to give their children this sort of burden. They know that, today is not an easy society to live in, so therefore they want their children to live as comfortably as possible. For me, if my mother needs money for necessities, of course I'm going to help out. But if it's just for leisurely activities, then no, she's not getting any money at all. Love you, Mum.
Very strict. I think there's like a conflict between the generations because the elder generation, they still believe that they should be taken care of because they took care of their parents and they want that to be returned from their children. So I think that's why there's a conflict between the younger and the elder generation that we must solve, really.
And not to mention, with rising living costs, a lot of families are deciding only to have one child, right? So I think that, hypes the burden for the child to take care of their parents and also for their parents to raise expectancies for their child to take care of them when they're older. But as you both mentioned, I think a lot of the youth are thinking that it's really up to the government to provide better senior welfare policies and infrastructure. So Jihi, why don't you walk us through some efforts being made in Korea at the moment?
Right, so the government currently has some benefits for the elderly parents, and it depends on the region, the amount. And benefits are also given to families in which 3 generations live together under one roof, meaning your grandparents, your parents, and yourself. And also some 200,000 won, or about $160 is given to those who live with parents who are 100 years old or even older. So there are different benefits being provided to different types of families living in the society.
I see. But what's the case abroad, Walter?
Well, I actually found something interesting of though there might be certain government benefits, there's also laws to actually protect the elderly and making sure that their children do look after them. So let's take a look at some Asian countries such as Singapore, Bangladesh, China, and India, who are also a part of the Confucian societies. They are supposed to look after their parents as part of their culture. Now, example, in Bangladesh, there is an act called the Parents Maintenance Act. Now, if you do not have a legitimate reason to look after your parents, you're actually fined around $1,200 US.
Wow.
In China, there's a law for the protection of the rights of interest of the elderly. You could face judicial treatment if you do not look after your parents. India is a very interesting one. Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act. You can get fined up to $75 US or even jailed for 3 months.
Wow.
Singapore also has a Maintenance of Parents Act, but they also can be fined if they don't have a legitimate reason not to look after their
What
parents.
were your thoughts when you heard about these different legislations?
Obviously, you feel kind of a bit bound, you have this responsibility to look after your parents. I mean, you don't want to go to jail because you're not looking after your parents, but I was very shocked because, it seems, it's just shocking.
Of course, I'm all for responsibility for sure, but I do also agree that better infrastructure is needed to help the growing and aging population. But before we move on, we're going to be hearing from a global millennial and hearing what she has to say about this issue. So to find out whether it's just Korean millennials and Gen Z that think it's not solely up to the child to take care of their parents when they get older, we have an interview with a millennial from the States. She's actually married to a Korean and living in Seoul at the moment, and we've had her on our show numerous times before. It's Jem Kozak. Welcome back, Jem.
Hello and good morning.
All right, Jem. So can you first explain to us when you first moved out from your parents' place?
Yes, for me and a lot of Americans, kind of millennials in my generation, I moved out at about 19 years old when I went to university. So a lot of people do move out when they go to university.
All right. And Jihi, do you have a question for Jen?
Right. So what would young people in the States then think about today's discussion topic, do you think?
I thought it's very interesting because I think a lot of the youth didn't think about it yet. Maybe, nowadays the youth, they're living in the now rather than the future, and it's not really their issue yet. And we don't know what it's going to be like in 20, 30, 40 years. So I think once people get to their 30s, they start to consider it a little bit more. But I think for the youth, it's not much of an issue quite yet.
Yeah, I think you and I have grown up in like similar circumstances. I also moved out of my house when I was 18 years old to go to university, and I moved here to Korea and I married a Korean woman. So do you think that this situation is a very like relatively Korean concept of looking after your parents? And like, did you experience this after marrying your husband?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my case, my parents-in-law live quite far away. They live in Busan and we are in Seoul. But definitely the kind of relationship, they didn't say directly, hey, we'd like you to help us out. But they have told me directly that after getting married, I am now responsible for Jesa. That's the memorial service. At every holiday, because my husband is the oldest son. So it's not taking care of the parents directly, but kind of taking care of the future responsibilities. But at the same time, if I do something nice for them, like on Parents' Day, carnations or money, they are very happy about it.
And Jem, do you have any kids?
Yes, I have 2 kids actually.
All right, so then this question would be perfect to ask. Would you expect for your kids later on to take care of you when you grow older?
Oh my gosh, absolutely not. For my parents too, when I moved out when I was young, they're like, see you later, have fun. Now we get to enjoy our life. And I think I would feel exactly the same. I want my children to enjoy their life, and now it's my time, mommy's time, to enjoy her life. So I think we can still get together and keep a close relationship, but I don't want them to take care of me. I feel like it would be such a burden.
And would you say what you just said right now represents most millennials in the United States?
I think so because of our parents' generation feeling that way. We also feel that way. Family is someone you have a good relationship with, not a heavy responsibility,
I love that. That was a great quote. It's not, love shouldn't come out from obligation. It should be really coming from a sincere heart.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Jem. It was a pleasure to have you here again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so Jem mentioned a lot of relatable, and I could empathize to a lot of points. What about you, Tihi?
I totally agree because all this, it makes it a burden because we have the obligations and the duties that we put on each other, especially in our society, Korean society, because we have all the Confucianism.
We're still tied down to that.
We're still tied down to that. And so we and we're also a collectivist society where we think families and the bond is really important. But what's really important is the fact that all these actions, behaviors, the nice words of love and gratitude come from your heart, not from like the duty and the sense of obligation, as you mentioned.
For sure. What about you, Walter?
Well, I also understand like when I got married, I did have this sense of responsibility to obviously do things like Chuseok, go to Chuseok, like you have to go. In Australia, if I really didn't want to go and do something, I just wouldn't do it. But here, when you get married, there is that responsibility to attend like birthdays and Chuseok and Seoul and all those kind of things. So I completely understand her.
Yeah, which is to preserve traditions for sure, but at the end of the day, it should come out from you wanting to be there and you wanting to continue it. Now, before we go on, we're also going to hear from our global viewers. So we asked what they think about looking after their elderly parents. So take a look at the screen. You can see 3 of them. An Kwan-chu said, to be honest, this was not a choice back in the day, but nowadays it depends on whether you can afford to do it without sacrificing your entire life. Caring for elders has never been easy. It's so cool said the concept of taking care of our elderly in the community is fantastic. They took care of us when we were babies, and it's our turn to return the love and nurturing that they provided for us when we were children. Asian Prince said, here in Taiwan, parents usually spend a lot of time looking after their kids. It's common for kids to take care of their parents after they get older. Now, I think our viewers gave us a really good foundation to end with our final thoughts. So we're going to be talking about what would be the most efficient, realistic thing to do? What's the middle ground between wanting to be a good child to your parents versus living your own life to the fullest?
Right. Well, I think you really should have a lot of conversations, communicate through the boundaries and the duties you should have for each other. I mean, I really liked how the other day I said I had a family dinner on Sunday for Parents' Day, right? And my dad said next time, starting next year, we shouldn't do anything much for the Parents' Day. We should just have a decent meal together. And he kind of tried to lessen that burden on us. And he said, anything that you want to give us on our birthdays, that's fine. But for Parents' Day, we could keep it minimal.
Low key.
Low key, yes. And I think this conversation, the point is to talk it through.
Right.
And make sure that you both of you, the family, I mean, the parents and the children feel comfortable and they know that you have love and gratitude to each other, for each other.
I understand in the past it might have been harder for older generations because there was that strict hierarchical line between parents and children. But nowadays, I think we're seeing much more open lines of communication. What are your thoughts on this, Walter?
Well, I heard that many people actually are more accepting to looking after their parents once they get older if the relationship between child and parent is actually strong and obviously very loving. So if you are one of those people who I guess one day would like their children to look after you, then you need to show them the amount of love that they need and therefore they will give that in return, hopefully. But for me, I wouldn't want to burden my daughter with, you know, once I get a bit older, I would like her to live her life and happily if she chooses to have a family, etc. For me, when I get to that age, I hope I'm living somewhere in the mountains away from society. But yes, for me, I'll be happy as long as she loves me and shows it.
Right, you and Jem seem to have similar thoughts on that. You want your children to live, you know, very independently and only express love when they really want to, right?
Right, exactly.
For sure. And before we end off, I would like to ask one more question. You know, we talked about how a growing number of youth are expecting the government to provide better infrastructure and welfare policies. Are there any in mind that you guys have, starting with Chihi?
Well, I mentioned a few that the government is currently providing in our country, right? But I think I always mention this when we talk about government measures. It should it should be bottom up, you know, listen to what the children are feeling the burden from and providing benefits that really suit their situation would be the best. So first, listen to the children.
Listen to the youth.
Yes, listen to the youth and also listen to the elderly people. What do they need? I mean, they are growing older healthily, but I'm sure they need something that the government isn't able to provide right now.
That's a really good point. And that's why a lot of senior citizens are actually saying that they'd be happier if they go out to the workplace, feel like they're needed. I think regardless of age, you always want to feel active and a really important part of society. Any suggestions you have, Walter?
Well, obviously, we need to look after the elderly in some way. And if the government can supply with, you know, we know that in Korea, the pension isn't fantastic, right?
For sure.
So we obviously need to look at that. Therefore, they won't have to be so dependent on their children for that financial gain, right? But obviously, it's easier said than done, and it's been something that's a hot topic for a very long time here in Korea.
And these are topics that we, as the new generation, need to be thinking about because, you know, as Walter, you're already a parent yourself. We're going to be ending up in that situation one day, so it's better to be prepared than not to.
Right.
And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee
Always a pleasure.
and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.